This is Cruise Radio.
I cruise a lot, and I always sail with travel insurance. You should too. Get a free quote today at tripinsurance.com.
Here we go.
Broadcasting from the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. This is Cruise Radio.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Doug Parker. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Cruise Radio. Happy to have you here, my friend. A review of the Margaritaville at-sea Islander, one of the Jimmy Buffett ships out of Tampa. Staff writer Richard Sims on deck with Cruise News, standing by here in just a couple of seconds. And also going to check in with Dan Skilkin, president of tripinsurance.com. Just wrapped up a couple of crazy storms, a couple of hurricanes out there that caused around 20 ship diversions. So get caught up with when you need to purchase travel insurance for hurricane season and much, much more. All right, staff writer Richard Sims up first. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Doug.
Kicking off the news with, some news that'll impact a whole lot of cruisers and actually one of your favorite ships too, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's Norwegian Cruise Line, and they just axed around 50 cruises on 4 ships. The company reached out to travel agents as well as guests who were booked on the Getaway, the Joy, the Dawn, and as you mentioned, one of my favorite ships, the Gem, which I absolutely love. And they said that this is going to impact cruises from late 2026 into 2027. And those cruises are basically canceled. It's a little bit weird. In the case of the Gem, she's going to basically swap places with the Dawn. As a result, the Dawn will go from your neck of the woods in Jacksonville to Tampa, and the Gem will do the opposite. They're really literally just switching places. And the reason I say this is a little odd is they are basically the same ship. They are the same basic size. I think one holds like 50 passengers more than the other. So it just seems odd to do this and inconvenience so many people and cancel so many cruises just to swap 2 ships that are the same size to opposite ports. Very odd. In any case, the new itineraries for these 2 ships should be coming out soon. As for Norwegian Joy and Getaway, there aren't quite as many cancellations, and the reason cited is port availability, but what they're doing is, because of this port availability or unavailability, as the case may be, they're axing some of the short cruises and replacing them with longer itineraries. And like with the other ships, those new itineraries and the new schedules and stuff should be out very soon because they want to start booking that stuff. But so, yeah, if you're on one of those cruises on those 4 ships toward the end of 2026, you might get canceled. The good news is it's so far in advance that even if you happen to be on like one of those really popular holiday cruises, you still have plenty of time to like get your whole family booked on the new itineraries.
And speaking of Norwegian, one of their ships made a very unexpected itinerary change this week, along with another Carnival ship.
Yeah, you have to love hurricane season. Thanks to storms currently brewing out there, guests on Norwegian Escape who thought they were going to be going to the Caribbean are instead going to be going to Boston and Canada. They've switched it to a sort of a northerly projection in order to avoid the storm. And on Wednesday morning, Carnival made the decision to replace Venezia's scheduled sailing out of New York City. They were supposed to go to Bermuda. Now they're also going to be going to Canada. And that one was a really last minute decision. They really held off until Wednesday morning. And then Wednesday morning, the day they were sailing, they basically said, okay, we're making this change. Obviously, it's a very big change for people who thought they'd be getting a little beach time. But if there's a consolation prize, it's that this is an amazing time to catch the fall foliage up north. I looked outside a few days ago and was like, when the heck did that happen? It's just suddenly absolutely beautiful here in Woodstock, and will be for another like 2 days until all the leaves are gone.
And we have one more NCL story here.
Yeah, this is kind of a big change they're making in the main dining room. And do you hear that? It's the sound of angry villagers gathering their pitchforks and torches to storm the castle and protest they are being nickel and dimed. Why? Because Norwegian very, very, very quietly introduced a new fee into the main dining room. Now, if you want a second entree, you'll be charged $5 for it. They put a little note on the bottom of the menu broadcasting this, or I shouldn't say broadcasting, because like I said, they really did it in kind of a whisper. Some people are going to say, who needs 2 entrees? But I'm not going to lie. I've done it, and I know you have too. Mm-hmm. In any case, Norwegian isn't the first to implement this kind of change. Usually when they do this, whenever a cruise line does this, they cite that they are attempting to cut down on food waste. Carnival's been doing it for a while, although as of 2022, they only charge you an extra fee if you want a third or fourth entree, but you can still get a second one free as far as I know.
What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with Carnival saying third and fourth entree. Mm-hmm. That does seem like, if you're going to eat that much, then yeah, we're going to charge you an extra $5. That's no big deal. But the second entree, I kind of disagree with. I mean, I remember several sailings that you and I have been on where, the entrees aren't always huge. And I'm fine with that because I like to eat a lot, try a lot of different things, get a bunch of appetizers. I feel like a second entree, first of all, $5 is not going to break anybody, but it is sort of the point of, well, wait a minute. Why are you taking away another thing that we were able to do up until now? Man,
I know it's only $5, but cruising is getting more and more.
I was reading somewhere that they were theorizing that part of this was due to vloggers coming on and ordering everything on the menu so that they can videotape it, but they're not actually eating it all. And I'm like, I don't really buy that because that's sort of silly.
And it looks like 2025 just surpassed 2024 in a way that nobody wanted.
Yeah, we're only in early October, but already there have been more gastrointestinal outbreaks in 2025 than there were last year, most of them attributable to neurovirus. The tiebreaker comes courtesy of Royal Caribbean Serenade of the Seas, where 71 passengers and one crew member fell ill on a recent sailing. This was the 19th outbreak of gastrointestinal disorders reported to the CDC this year, whereas 18 were reported last year. So that's where we get we're breaking last year's number. According to USA Today, there's a new dominant strain of norovirus, which has caused quite a few outbreaks on land. So it makes sense that some of these would make their way onto ships. But as always, it's important to remember that neuro is far, far, far more common on land where outbreaks aren't necessarily reported, whereas at sea, once they reach a certain percentage, they have to be reported to the CDC. And even with what's considered a large outbreak on a ship, I think in this case, it's how many we say, like 100, 150 people. It's still only impacting a really small percentage of those on board, passengers and crew. So, while you're going to see screaming headlines about, neurovirus and records from 2025 and all this, it really is a very small percentage of people that it impacts.
Virgin Voyages is shaking up their fare structure, and not everyone is excited.
Oh, come on now, Doug. Has there ever been a change in the history of cruising that didn't ruffle at least some feathers?
True.
In this case, Virgin announced they're rolling out a tiered pricing system. They made a very big deal about this as if they are like the first people to ever do this, but they're not. We've seen this before. We've seen it on other lines. Basically, how it breaks down is that starting on October 7th, they're introducing what they're calling voyage fare pricing. It breaks down into 3 levels. The base fare is exactly what it sounds like. You get, the things you normally expect on a Virgin, but no perks. The second tier is the essential level. And the big difference between the base and the essential level is that with the base level, your window for booking dining reservations is only 15 days, which is not much. At the essential level, you basically get everything you got in the past with a Virgin Voyages sailing, but it also includes a 45-day booking window for dining reservations, and that's a pretty big difference. The final level is the premium level, which costs an extra $45 a day and includes a better Wi-Fi package for 2 guests and a $15 per day bar tab, which, is nothing. Most drinks cost at least $15. But the real perk here could be the 60-day dining reservation booking window. That puts you at a much better level than those who are booking at either the essential or base level. One really important thing to note is that if you want to book under the old pricing structure, the way it existed before, you can still do that up until October 7th. In fact, I just did that yesterday on a sailing for next year when they bring Valiant Lady to New York. Since I did Brilliant Lady and loved it so much, I want to try another of the sister ship, and I was able to do it under the old pricing tier. You can do that right up until October 7th. At that point, the new pricing goes into effect.
Okay, this might be a stupid question, but then wouldn't people be like freaking out about tips because they're also increasing?
It kind of doesn't make sense that people are freaking out about this, but of course they are. For various reasons, including some involving legalities, Virgin is now breaking out the tips into their own line item, whereas before they were just sort of rolled into the overall price. One really good thing to note here is that you can actually save on gratuities, which I don't know if I've ever seen this done before. Maybe it has been. If you pay them in advance, it'll cost you $20 per person per day. Whereas if you do it on board, like by having it added to your portfolio every day, it's $22 per person per day. So that can really add up, that, $2 per person per day. It seems obvious, pay them in advance and save that money. They went out of their way to say that no matter whether you pay them in advance, don't pay them in advance, or even have them removed, which you never hear about that really on Virgin. And I think that's because they never had them separated out before, but you always did have the ability to go and remove them. But no matter what, which by the way, don't do, but no matter what, the crew gets paid the same. So even if you take off the gratuities or if you pay in advance and so you're paying $2 less per person per day, the crew is still getting the same pay, which I love hearing that.
And we wrap up with some good news for Carnival Cruise Line, which might not be good news for their passengers.
Yeah, if you want proof the cruise industry is booming, look at the third quarter numbers Carnival released this week. Here's one that really jumped out at me. They are currently holding $7.1 billion, that's billion with a B, in deposits for future cruises. That's insane. That's just a crazy amount of money. And that is just what they are holding on future cruises. And by every other metric, they are basically printing money. Revenue up, bookings up, price of bookings up. Interestingly, in the immediate aftermath of this earnings report, the stock actually slipped a little, but analysts say that really doesn't have anything to do with the strength of the company. It's more to do with the fact that the earnings report was really great, but some people were expecting it to be even better. And casual observers of the market, or casual people who are buying stock, just sort of looking at what they expected the earnings to be, they might have sold after the earnings report. So, yes, the stock slipped a little bit. I think it was like 1.3% or something, but really doesn't reflect on this. This is great news for Carnival, but it also means that according to the law of supply and demand, you're not likely to be finding any bargain basement pricing right now. I mean, if they can sail their boats at 100% capacity or higher, and people are lining up to give them money, they're not going to say, you know what, let's cut prices. Let's give people a deal on this. Just not going to happen. So, there are ways you can try and find and save money, and there are, plenty of tips on Cruise Radio. But at the end of the day, you're probably not going to find, the kind of bargain prices you can find when the business is not booming the way it is.
Yeah, and speaking of supply and demand, I know Carnival Cruise Line has a lot of these new ships on order, but also remember Costa is getting rid of one of their ships to Margaritaville at Sea next year. And then, of course, those two P&O cruises that just were offloaded, and two went to Carnival Cruise Line and two were sold third party. So, yeah, less supply, more demand is right.
And there's, it's worth noting, it's not just Carnival. There are so many new ships coming down the pike. It feels like over the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to be getting a new ship like every 3 months. There's just so many ships. And it'll be interesting. We've seen Carnival reduce their fleet by, shifting to other portions of the Carnival family, or by selling them, or even in some cases scrapping them over the last few years. We haven't really seen as much of that with some of the other lines. I'll be interested to keep an eye as Royal Caribbean in particular is rolling out so many new ships and, new classes and additions to old classes. They at some point are going to have to start, I would think, getting rid of some of those older ships in their fleet. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
All right. Staff writer Richard Sims, as always, thank you, man.
The world is constantly changing. Your place for news is still the same. Online and on demand at cruiseradio.net.
A big question we get at Cruise Radio is, how do I know if I need trip insurance? Simple answer. If you're getting on a plane, taking a road trip, or getting on a cruise ship, you need to have travel insurance. Hey, it's Doug Parker from my friends at tripinsurance.com. Not only does tripinsurance.com protect your vacation investment, but it also gives you peace of mind in case anything were to go wrong on your trip. How do they do it? They offer 3 different types of trip insurance policies. Good, better, and best. One policy for every vacation budget. But it doesn't just stop there. They're up to 40% lower when you shop around on other comparison sites. Plus, tripinsurance.com offers 24-hour customer support before, during, and after your trip, online claims assistance, and travel alerts to let you know what's going on at your destination. But find out for yourself. Check out tripinsurance.com.
Have a tip or a lead on a news story? Let us know. Email tips@cruiseradio.net.
Ashley just returned from the Margaritaville at Sea Islander, and she's no stranger to the ship, so she's here to share her review. Hey, Ash.
Hey, Doug. How are you?
Like I said, you are no stranger to the Margaritaville at Sea Islander.
This was my 3rd time on board, and the main reason I went was to check out their 7-night sailings. Previously, they were doing some shorter, like 4- and 5-night ones, so they added a few ports. They expanded their main dining room menu. They have added some new shore excursions, and I was very curious to see what that would look like. I also was part of the inaugural sailing, which was not great. And then I went back on board maybe 6 months later, and things had vastly improved. So I was curious to see if there would be even more improvement. And there was, which I was excited to see.
Did you do any pre-cruise time in Tampa before the sailing?
I didn't. No, I actually flew in super early the day of, which I almost never do. But this time my schedule didn't allow me to fly in a day early. So I took my chances, but everything worked out.
How long of a drive is that from the Tampa International Airport?
I'd say 20 minutes, maybe 30. It was, I did Ubers both ways before and after. And I think it was about like $30 roughly, maybe give or take $5 in each direction.
You take the cab from the Tampa airport to the cruise port. How was embarkation?
I was booked in a suite, so I was able to board very seamlessly with no issues. I also got there later in the day, so there was less of a crowd. And that's something I always tell people to do is if you just wait a little bit and kind of head over maybe a couple of hours before the cutoff window, tends to be a lot less hectic. There were no other lines. Like, even though I was in a suite, I didn't see anyone else waiting in line when I was there. So that was nice.
Walking on board the ship, what can someone expect as they cross the gangway and make their way, like in the atrium?
The thing that always gets me, and again, this is my 3rd sailing, so the fact that it still gets me is saying something, but the atrium is amazing. So this is an older style of ship. I believe it's pushing like 25, 30 years. And it is a Joe Farkas design. So for those who don't know, he's an architect and an interior designer who did a bunch of design work for Carnival ships and Costa ships. This is an old Costa ship. And it's just so quirky and colorful. And the atrium, I think it rises like 7 or 8 decks, I believe. So it's very tall. A lot of newer ship designs have sort of cut out those really tall atriums in favor of extra cabin space, because if they can sell extra cabins, they can make extra money. But the atrium is just, there's a bar right there as soon as you walk in with a stage behind it. So there's often live music. There's a giant flip-flop that says Margaritaville on it. It's great for taking pictures. And there are glass elevators that go up and down, in addition to the standard elevators. But it's almost like a carnival a little bit, like lights and colors, and just very different from anything I've seen on a ship that has debuted recently.
Yeah, well, it's Costa Atlantica, Costa Mediterranea. They were basically Carnival Spirit class ships. So all those 7 ships or so have almost the same layout. So it is cool to kind of have a sense of nostalgia as you walk in there. As you make your way to your stateroom, you said you were in a suite. So what kind of stateroom was that throughout the 7 nights? And the ship is 20 or so years old. How modern was it?
I was in a grand terrace suite, which is essentially a balcony cabin. The balcony was a bit larger than what you would get with a standard balcony cabin. And there was a separate alcove area. So when I walked in, if you keep going straight, there's obviously the balcony. To the left was like a small bar setup, like a little bar top with 2 high bar stools and a mini fridge that didn't have anything in it. And then to the right was the bed, which was able to be separated. And then there was like a closet next to the bed with a vanity area, and the TV was mounted there. But when you first walk in, immediately on the right, if you don't proceed into like the bed area, there's a little cutout that has a whole separate vanity with a giant mirror, some drawers, and there's a second closet. So I was traveling by myself. I had a ton of closet space. I didn't even use the second closet other than to just store my luggage. And then the bathroom was pretty large. It had dual sinks, a tub in addition to it, like a tub and shower combo, which, bathtubs are not common at sea. They completely redid a lot of the cabins, especially the higher end ones on this ship. So it actually felt very modern. You could tell in some places, like the tub grouting and things like that it was a little older, but overall very bright, very airy, very beach themed. As you know, Margaritaville is a Jimmy Buffett affiliated company. So it really tied in references to him, throw pillows and things that had some of his common song names. The shower wall was overlaid with like a giant decal of a beach scene with a palm tree. So it felt very on brand for them.
Where was your Grand Terrace suite?
It was on deck 6. It was room 6197 on the starboard side, roughly midship area.
Let's talk about the food on the Islander. So up a couple of decks is the buffet area. What was that like? And did it ever feel too crowded during? What was the food like? And did it ever feel too crowded throughout your voyage?
Oddly, it didn't feel too crowded. I've been at buffets that were much worse. It is a smaller buffet because it is a smaller ship than what some people might be used to. So it was kind of mirrored, like there were two sides and the two sides were identical. So the offerings were somewhat limited, but they did switch things up every day. So it wasn't just the same stuff. And I will say the food quality, presentation, and variety has improved a lot since that first inaugural sailing I did. You'll see a lot of that same really cool, original Joe Farkas design in the buffet as well. There's a sort of a dome that looks down from the top decks into the buffet below, and there's a steakhouse in there as well. So there's a really cool staircase that goes up into where the steakhouse extra fee restaurant is. So that was pretty neat too. Another thing I should probably shout out here is that the ship's cafe is in the buffet, which is not typical for most ships. Mm-hmm. It's extra fee, so you can get specialty coffee. And oddly, there's no drink package on board that covers specialty coffee, which I thought was a little strange, particularly because I'm someone who loves coffee and I don't drink much alcohol or soda. But and they also sell absolutely fantastic sandwiches and pastries that are just out of this world. So highly recommend those.
You said they sell them, so is it much different than the buffet food?
Yes. I thought it was a lot better than the buffet food, which frankly it should be if you're paying extra for it. But the buffet food I thought was decent. I ate there a few times, and normally I avoid buffets altogether if I can. So the fact that I went back more than once is a testament to, it's not the best food you'll ever eat, but it's definitely not the worst either.
Let's talk about the main dining room. I've heard that it's set up
So their main dining rooms are interesting in that it's a 2-deck main dining room. They call the lower level fins, and that's for just like basic cabins. Anybody booked there in basic cabins. And the upper deck is called Islander, and that is it offers the same menu as fins downstairs, but it also offers a supplemental menu for an additional fee. And that fee is waived for passengers who are booked in suites. So anyone booked in a suite automatically is assigned to Islander. So that was where I ate. And anyone who's not booked in a suite can eat there, but then they just pay the supplement if they order something from that supplemental menu.
What kind of food is on that for-fee menu?
It's just additional. I saw a lot of fish. There were upcharge items on the standard menu as well, like steak. I believe there might have been lobster on there. I don't really remember. Frankly, I think I only ordered from that supplemental menu one time because the stuff on the standard menu looked really appealing. And I was frankly blown away by how good some of it was. And with the 7-night sailings, so on the previous sailings, they had a different menu for each night. And rather than just starting over at night 1 and night 2, when they got to night 6 and 7 on the 7-nighter, they developed 2 additional menus for those last 2 nights. So every night of the sailing is something different, apart from the, like every cruise line MDR menu has a standard section that's like anytime that for picky eaters or whatever. So that stayed the same every night. But otherwise, everything else was switched up, which was some nice variety. But I had a really good pulled pork enchilada that was amazing. They had a few Indian and sort of like Caribbean dishes on there that were great. The dessert, they had like this cake that was a coconut pineapple thing, really, really tasty. And my first night on board, I actually had some of the best crusted salmon I've had in a very long time.
Did you get to check out the steakhouse? And if so, how was it?
I did. I had dinner one night in the steakhouse. The filet mignon was cooked exactly how I ordered it. It was very good. Came with 2 sides. I think I got mac and cheese and broccoli, I believe. And for dessert, they have key lime pie, and they have I can't remember the name specifically, but it's a coconut dessert. And I ordered the coconut, and it was out of this world. The service was great. It's a neat atmosphere. It was not super crowded when I was in there, so I don't really know how necessary it is to make reservations or anything. They also have a sushi restaurant. It is near Far Side of the World, which is one of their like secondary theater venues. And it's kind of like, you don't really know it's a sushi restaurant because it just looks like a bar, but they also have a sushi counter there. And you can order, like, I got edamame and like a cucumber roll. I think it was like maybe $15 total. So pretty affordable. Like, you just kind of pay a la carte for what you order. It was strange, though, because the last time I sailed, I ate there and they had like waiter service where you sit down in the bar area and someone comes over and takes your order. But when I ate there, this time it was for lunch. And so like I kind of just ordered at the counter and they gave it to me in a takeout container, which was a little strange. I did see later that day people were eating there for dinner and there were waiters. So I think maybe it just depends on the time of the day. But what I had was great, equivalent to what you'd get at your favorite local sushi place. I did find the atmosphere there a little strange, though, because like when I was trying to eat, they had like a kids circus activity going on at the lounge that's kind of part of this area. So it's not a very peaceful place to eat, but the food was okay.
About a year ago or so, I had someone on reviewing this ship, and they were talking about a burger place and then separately a pizza place. Are those places different from each other, and do they charge?
They do not cost extra. So think of it, it's actually very similar to what Carnival does on a lot of its ships. The pizza shop is Frank and Lola's, and that is in the buffet. The pizza's fantastic. And they serve it, I believe it starts at like 11 or 12, like around lunchtime. And it goes through like 2 a.m. or something. So you can get pizza nearly all day. And it's like the only place open after hours for food if you've been out clubbing or whatever. And then on the pool deck, they have one on each side. There's a burger place, cheeseburger in paradise, fittingly, is what it's called. The burgers are excellent. And then on the other side, they have Mexican Cutie, which is like tacos. And then for breakfast, they're open for burritos. And the breakfast burritos are amazing. The burgers are pretty good too. They're not quite as good as Guys, but they give them a run for their money, definitely.
Any other grab and go places or maybe room service or anything we didn't cover yet?
They do have room service, but everything is for a fee, including breakfast items. So I didn't order anything from room service. Before
we talk about entertainment, what kind of crowd does this ship draw? Is it like all parrot heads?
Surprisingly, no. There are some, but what's interesting about Margaritaville, I think, is that because it's so affordable, It attracts a lot of group travelers, so families, bachelorette parties, reunions, because when you're dealing with a bunch of people who all have different vacation budgets, a lower cost cruise line is generally a better way to go because everybody can find something that's within their budget. I didn't find it to be super over the top rowdy. Like they're fun. They enjoy having, several drinks. They enjoy staying out late. They did have a lot of late night programming that they have added to the longer sailings. There's a nightclub on board. So they had a DJ in there every night that would go pretty late. They have a lot of live music in the atrium area. They have some on the pool deck during the day. They really made a point to increase the live music. So they had like a band. They had some solo, really good electric guitar player who would play and sing in the atrium. They had a violinist who she would do some solo performances, but she was also part of the shows in the main theater. I'm trying to think. They had a couple of like big production shows in the theater. One was like a country themed one, and the other one was like a Caribbean Latin sort of feel. They're also currently doing Halloween programming, which to me is interesting because a lot of cruise lines won't celebrate the holidays unless you actually are cruising during the actual date of the holiday. Disney, I think, is the only other line that really plays up Halloween stuff for a month or two leading up to Halloween. And now Margaritaville is doing the same. So they had different specials on board, like for drinks and stuff. They had a themed cocktail at each of the onboard bars. They had a bunch of Halloween themed coffee, like specialty coffee beverages at the cafe. They did an adults only costume contest on the second last night of the sailing. They've done a lot to increase the amount of entertainment, particularly at night for these week-long sailings.
Does this line have a cruise director?
Yes. So their cruise director is ZJ. She is very well known among the folks who sail. She's great. She hosts all the major events. And then she's got an entertainment team that kind of takes on the side activities like trivia and some of the like dance classes and things like that.
The casino is non-smoking, so we'll skip that. Is this like the Spirit class ships with 2 pools on Lido?
Yes, there are 2 pools. There is the 5 o'clock somewhere pool and the Land Shark pool, which also has a Land Shark bar attached to it. The 5 o'clock somewhere pool is fun. It's got like a giant blender statue, which is really funny. I believe that the 5 o'clock somewhere pool also has a retractable roof, so it's good for days that are rainy. We did have a few rainy days on this trip, unfortunately. As far as crowds, I mean, yeah, some of the places where there were activities were crowded, but overall, I found the flow to be pretty great. And one thing I do want to call out, because it was a pleasant surprise, is that the Margaritaville at Sea does offer NFL games. They broadcast them all on board the ship in the sports bar and also on the pool deck. A lot of cruise lines, they might get like one game if you're lucky, but Margaritaville made a point to make sure that it could broadcast because it was something that passengers were really requesting. So our first day on board was a Sunday, and I spent a nice chunk of it in the sports bar watching the Eagles win. So go Birds.
Yeah. Do they have an adults only space?
They do. It's at the very aft, just past the buffet on deck 9. It's like a tiki pool area, so it overlooks the wake of the ship. It's got loungers, and then it's got like a tiki bar set up where you can get drinks. And also, I should have mentioned this, thank you for reminding me, added fee options. They have like 2 different counters where you can order like seafood bites and conch fritters and stuff like that.
All right, so you leave Tampa, you're heading to the Western Caribbean. What was your first port of call and what was the highlight for you?
Our first port was Key West, and I actually didn't disembark that day. I stayed on board and enjoyed a burger on a very deserted pool deck, which was nice. So I ate at a table that kind of overlooked Key West. So I enjoyed the views, but stayed on board and had some peace and quiet. Our second port of call was Costa Maya, Mexico. I got off briefly just to walk around a bit, but I didn't do a shore excursion or anything, and there's not really too much to see right there. Just a lot of like shopping and bars and stuff. So I did a couple laps and then got back on board. The third port that we did was Belize, which again, it's kind of difficult to really see anything beyond the immediate port area if you don't do a tour. And unfortunately, I was doing work that morning, so I only got off for about an hour to walk around. And this is kind of funny, but the main reason I even got off at all in Belize was because it's a tender port, and I really wanted to get some good photos of the ship. So I used the tender ride as an opportunity to do that. It's, for those who don't know, pro tip, it's one of the best ways to get exterior shots of a ship without people in the way, without a dock in the way. Really lets you get the whole thing in there. I definitely do want to mention our stop in Cozumel, though, because I did a Day of the Dead tour, which they're offering as part of their Halloween programming. So it's a seasonal thing. But it was about a 20-minute car ride to a place called Mayan Cacao was the name of it. So they had a guide who kind of took us to some different Day of the Dead altars and explained the history behind why they do Day of the Dead and what goes into kind of creating an altar to honor loved ones that you've lost. And then afterward, they showed us how to make traditional Mayan chocolate, which was a really neat process to see. It's all like very natural ingredients and stuff. And then at the end, there was like an arts and crafts component, which was we got to make our own Day of the Dead sugar skull magnets. I was a little concerned when they were talking about the arts and crafts. I thought it might be a little juvenile, but it wasn't at all. It was neat. So it was a good excursion for families and for adults if you're not traveling with kids. And it was raining that day. So it was a really good tour to do on a day when the weather isn't great.
And I will just add, since you didn't get off the ship in Key West, if your ship does call to Key West, you can always do something like a trolley tour, go to the southernmost point, rent bikes and, check out the city, do a bar crawl. And then for Belize and Belize City, isn't that cave tubing?
Yes, I think we did that together at one point
that's what I was
with
thinking.
Jen. My friend Jen was there. Yeah, it's I think a combo of like cave tubing and ziplining, which is super duper fun. And I will say too, normally I do get off the ship in port. I don't want to sound like one of those people who never gets off the ship. But in this case, I had been to these ports several times before and had a ton of work to do. So I unfortunately spent part of my vacation working.
You mentioned that you had some rainy days in there. How was the ride going back into Tampa?
It was a little rough at times, but nothing severe. Like I didn't get seasick. I didn't see anybody else getting seasick. So you could feel it, but it was largely smooth.
How was the debark process once you returned to Tampa?
That was a little chaotic. I shouldn't say chaotic. It was organized, but there was a line. So there was priority disembarkation offered for people booked in suites or who booked. They have special packages you can book that include priority boarding and disembarkation and stuff like that. So for anybody who met those criteria, they had somebody to escort you off right away. The problem with that was you had to go really early in the morning. And I am not a morning person, so I figured I would just wait and disembark the regular way with everybody else. And I carried my own bags off, so I kind of was able to go whenever I wanted. And by the time I got down there to disembark, there was a line kind of wrapped from the gangway around through like one of the elevator banks and all the way down into the casino. And it didn't take long. It just like it looked worse than it was. I would say I was in line for maybe 10 to 15 minutes max.
Okay.
And then once I actually got off the ship, I bypassed the luggage area because I didn't have to collect my luggage. And they have the facial scanner. So if you're traveling with a passport, you just don't even have to have it out. You can look at the camera and it'll usher you right on through.
I want to circle back and ask you a couple of things. So with the suite that you were in, you mentioned that you had priority boarding and you also had access to that restaurant in the main dining room or the special level. Did it include anything else?
Yes, you have access to a concierge lounge, which is one deck up. I think it's deck 3 from the main atrium. You can go there to get free soda and coffee. They have like I don't know if it's an espresso machine, but it's similar to that, and bottled water. And then there's also a concierge in there who has hours throughout the day where you can go make requests for bookings and things like that. They also offer priority seating in the theater for shows for people booked in suites. And you get in-cabin bottled water as well, 2 fairly large bottles per day. And then if you run out, you can go down to the concierge desk to get extra ones. And if you're someone who's booked in a standard cabin, they do offer packages you can buy. I think they range from like $130 to like $800 per person that allow different combinations of those perks. Things like priority check-in, luggage delivery. I think there's beverage packages included in some of them, specialty dining, spa credits, stuff like that.
How was the Wi-Fi? I know you're a remote worker.
There's 3 tiers of it. There's like a basic tier. There's a tier that lets you stream. And then there's a business tier, which is like for people who are taking Zoom calls and need like, top level connection. I bought the mid-tier, like just the streaming one, and I thought it was excellent. I had no connectivity issues whatsoever.
Do they have an app? And if so, like how integrated is it into the cruise experience?
They don't have an app, which I find equal parts frustrating and refreshing. I think it's nice that you're not forced to be tied to your phone for your whole sailing if you don't want to be. But I did find it a little cumbersome to like check schedules for things because I often just ended up carrying my paper copy of the daily around with me. There's also not really, they don't have, like most ships will have a ship map in every elevator bank so you can see where you're at on board. They don't have that on Islander, which was really irritating when I got lost. And I went to the front desk to ask if they had a paper copy, and they did, but it was humongous. Like it took up the whole countertop. So I just took pictures of it. They do have QR codes that you can scan to access. I believe they call it cruise control. It's like a portion of their website that has a lot of this information. But if you don't, think to do it and you don't want to be on your phone all the time, it's a little bit of a clunky experience. They do put the QR code on your key card as well. So like it is easily accessible. It's just, I feel like it's not really something they've invested a lot of effort into right now. And I guess this might be a good time to mention, they do sort of the more old style muster drills where you have to report at a specific time in person, and you stand out on deck in the heat, like 3 or 4 rows deep until they can give you the spiel. And I am told that they are working on e-muster and they're very close to rolling it out. So that is some technology that they have invested in.
Does the ship offer any kind of, I don't know, it's like sea day brunch or whatever you want to call it?
They do have one on sea days. I did it on one of the sea days on my sailing. It's $15 a person. And I ordered the chicken and waffles. It was amazing and a huge portion. I think they brought out like 2 waffles and 3 giant pieces of chicken, which I couldn't even finish it all. And the flavor was good too. It was spicy, but not overpowering. So highly recommend.
Speaking of sea days, do they have any kind of, I don't know, wine classes, mixology classes, tastings they offer to kind of help the sea days go by a little quicker, if you will?
They do. They offer a wine tasting, which has, I think it's 5 different wines and cheeses. It's led by one of the maitre d's on board, and that is, I think it's $29.99 a person. And they also do a mixology class at the wine tasting is in the main dining room. The mixology class is at the Hemisphere Bar, which is like a cocktail bar. And they have a team of like a duo of bartenders that lead you through 5 cocktails. They show you how to make them, and then you get to try them all. And I believe that one is like $35 a person.
Having sailed pretty much all the major cruise lines out there, Ashley, what was the most unexpected thing that you experienced on board?
I think just how much I had a good time. I'm sometimes skeptical with lines that are more affordable, like, oh, maybe they've cut corners, or maybe you're going to encounter a crowd that hasn't cruised before and is maybe not sure of how to behave on a cruise. And I really didn't get that on this sailing. It was a lot of people who they know what to expect ahead of time. So they know it's not a luxury line. It's an older ship. They haven't paid very much to be there. So it is very much like cheap and cheerful. You're just there to relax, be casual, come as you are, have a good time, live and let live. It's very true to the Jimmy Buffett concept of escapism, where it's like everyone's just there to get away from their cares, to escape the 9-to-5 grind, and kind of rejuvenate. And that's very much what I got out of it.
Is there a spa or a thermal suite on board?
There is a spa on board. There's a fitness center. There's a spa, and they actually currently in the spa. Oh, not currently. I shouldn't say currently, because they now have an actual tattoo parlor that they just unveiled the day I disembarked, actually. Wow. But up until this point, they were offering tattoo services in their spa, which is interesting. So I did not get a tattoo. I thought about it, but I didn't.
Do you have any tips to offer anyone who might be considering sailing Margaritaville at sea?
I would say, again, just set your expectations. If you're somebody who needs full service, all-inclusive, high-end, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere. It's probably not the line for you. But if you're someone who can appreciate a really cool older ship that is just really good fun, I think you'll be fine.
Well, in closing here, your final thoughts of the Margaritaville at Sea Islander.
I would say give it a try. Even if you're someone who's cruised with other lines, as long as you can keep an open mind and set your expectations before you go and realize it's not going to be, butler service and expensive champagne, it's a really good time. And it's super affordable too, which I think makes it accessible to a lot more people, and particularly people who maybe haven't cruised before and they're just looking to see like, oh, well, what is cruising like? So yeah, it has a wide appeal, I think.
Any kind of Starbucks or any, their branded coffee stands on board?
They don't have any coffee partnerships, but they are about to put Cuban coffee offerings in their Havana sports bar area, which I was ecstatic to hear about. Unfortunately, it was not up and running yet when I sailed, but it is coming. So keep an eye out for that.
We've been talking with Ashley about her 7-night cruise on the Margaritaville at Sea Islander. Ashley, always good talking to you. Thanks for sharing this review.
Thanks, Doug.
All right, Dougie, let's see what we got for you, buddy. Cruise Radio is produced at the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. Get cruise news, ship reviews, and money-saving tips every Thursday on Cruise Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. If you want to help spread the word, give Cruise Radio a 5-star review. Find Cruise Radio where you listen to your favorite podcast or online at cruiseradio.net. I'm your announcer,